Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you tonight. We thank you for being here as we join together for Bible study on this Wednesday night. As you know, on these Wednesday nights, we are studying a series of lessons that's titled Major Tests of Our Faith. And we've talked about a number of things that we have to deal with as Christians and that can be challenging, that can test us. Tonight's lesson is about worldly surroundings. And I thought our author, Bill Hall, introduced it very succinctly in his brief introductory sentences. We live in a corrupt world. Immorality abounds. The Christian's faith is constantly tried as a result of the worldly society in which he lives. I think that's a true statement. I really believe that that's fair to say. One of the dangers I think we have to be careful about is trying to assume that we live in the worst of all times. I think our times are bad. I think we live in a very corrupt world, a lot of wickedness and evil. But we should never excuse ourselves or even begin to imagine that these are the worst of all possible times. It'd be pretty hard to sell that argument to Noah, I think, don't you? That we live in the worst of all times. But the people of God, the faithful people of God, have always been challenged thusly. They're living amongst worldly people, and there are evil influences around us. And so that's just a challenge we have to accept as a reality, and we have to deal with it. Our author starts us out with a familiar passage in 1 John 2. 1 John 2, verses 15 and 16, also read 17. 1 John 2:15, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passeth away and the lust thereof, but he that doeth the will of God abideth forever. As I said, that's a familiar passage to us, and we use it a lot. But notice that if you love the world, verse 15, the love of the Father is not in you. Now, I think the right way to understand that is that it's an either-or situation. You can't have it both ways. You can't love the world and love the Lord. If you love the world, the love of the Father is not in you. It's not saying the Father doesn't love you. It's saying if you love the world, then it's not possible to have a proper love for the Lord. That's the contrast. The two things are absolutely not compatible. You can't love the Lord and love the things of this world. And then, of course, he mentions the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. We've talked about this many times in the past, but a lot of people have suggested, I think it's probably a fair way to look at it, that those are the three main ways that we are tempted or challenged in this world. A lot of people go back and draw a parallel to Eve when she was tempted by Satan in the Garden of Eden. A lot of people draw a parallel to Jesus when he was tempted by Satan after he had fasted in the wilderness for 40 days. I think those are probably fair comparisons and all things that we have got to be on guard about. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. They've always been in the world. Don't think that we're the first ones to have to face up to these things. And for that matter, don't think they'll ever go away either, because that's not going to happen as long as this world stands. That's just what we're in. And if you love the world, it's not possible to have a right love for God. Josh?
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I didn't put this in my notes, but Jesus talked about how no man can serve two masters. So the either or, I think that's exactly what's at play here. You can't serve both. You can't love the world and love God. That's not going to work out. And those that try to do that are going to fail. They're going to end up loving the world. And so, those that are focused on this life have different goals than those that are focused on God. And so I think that's important. And then we're going to be tempted in one of those three ways too. And so it's good to know what we're up against. It's like the opponent's game plan.
Yeah.
We know how we're going to be tempted. Just be aware of it. Be on guard against it.
That's a good way to look at it. We know the avenues that Satan is going to use to try and get at us. Right. So set your guard. Yeah. Set your guard. Good point. Anybody, thought or comment? All right. Like I said, those are really familiar verses to us, but always we got to take them to heart. Okay, Josh.
All right, number 2, it says, how can one avoid being conformed to the world according to Romans 12:2? So if you turn to Romans chapter 12, I'll read the first couple of verses of Romans 12. Pretty familiar couple of verses. So Romans 12, beginning of verse 1, says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And so again, the question is, how can one avoid being conformed to the world according to these couple of verses, specifically verse 2? Well, so verse 2 says, don't be conformed to the world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Probably got that verse memorized, but it's all about your mindset. So our mindset's got to change. So we avoid being conformed to the world by thinking about what we do in a different way. Every day at work, I deal with worldly-minded people, and the things they do are worldly-minded actions. You know, they're not worried about spiritual things, and so their actions are a result of their mindset. And I see that every day. It's sad, actually. But so the Christians we're living the same life, we're living in the same country, we're dealing with the same circumstances, but our approach should be different, and so our actions should be different. So it's all a mindset. I was thinking about Philippians 3. If you want to look at Philippians 3, verse 19, Paul kind of gave a warning about the opposite worldly mindset in Philippians 3:19. In talking about the enemies of the cross, he said, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is in their shame, who mind earthly things. And that's the contrast. I mean, that's the other side of it. The enemies of the cross mind earthly things. Their God is their belly. So what's going to make me feel good? What looks good to me? And that's the mindset.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, we've repeated this over and over again. We are what we think about. Thoughts precede actions. And so if you want to be not conformed to the world, you got to change your way of thinking. You got to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You got to change your mind. You got to think in different ways. But unfortunately, the force of society is to try and get us to conform and to think about things the way they think about them. And now here's where I think, and we're going to talk more about this as we go on, but here's where I think we may be under a greater challenge maybe than generations of Christians who went before us, because the culture has so many ways of bombarding us with their thoughts. Think like this, dress like this, act like this, and all the pressure to conform, and we've got to be transformed by thinking differently. And so we got to be aware that there are strong forces trying to condition our thought processes, and the way we think about things leads to the way we act. So we got to really be, as Paul said, transformed by the renewing of your mind. Anybody have a thought or comment on any of this? You guys are awful quiet tonight.
Greg, I was thinking about, Kristen and I have talked about it often. You got maybe a children's show or a children's movie, and they, everything will be fine, everything will be clean, and then they have like one or two words in there. Why did they have to drop? That didn't have anything to do with anything that's going on. Or there'd be a scene in there that has some kind of, sexual reference or whatever. And you're thinking, why in the world are they dropping that in there? And I think, to your point, well, it's on purpose, because
Sure.
if we can think that way, then we'll act that way. And so now in our day and age, political correctness is all this gender identity business and stuff. And so that stuff is in little kids' shows. I mean, there's shows that we can't even let the kids watch, because it'll be a child that has two moms,
Yeah.
two dads.
Have you noticed how many times in advertisements, they don't say anything, but they show two men together or
Right.
two
Yeah.
women together? Obviously,
It's like they're I can't say the word. Obligatory.
yeah, they feel obligated.
They feel obligated to get something in
They
there.
don't say anything about it, but they picture it
Right.
as normal.
Right.
This is normal.
And if we see that, if children see that, and they're like, oh well, it's normal to have
Yeah.
a couple dads, then they'll act accordingly. So it's all on purpose, I think.
Yeah. Karen.
I clicked on an article on my news page about why many people are leaving Christianity. And of course, since I did that, now I'm getting inundated with articles like that.
They're tracking you.
Right, but one of the things that they were pointing out, like they give a lot of reasons, and a diversity and, you know, that they're not changing with the times. There's so much of that in ours that are making people, instead of transforming their minds and their lives, they are wanting to conform to the changes.
Yeah. So this is, of course, this is the word you hear thrown around. We live in the postmodern age. And postmodernism, in its simplest definition, is there are no absolutes. There is nothing right and wrong. And it's all to be determined by your own opinion of things. But your opinion about things might well be different than my opinion about things. Therefore, you can't judge me and I can't judge you. There are no absolutes. That's the way the world is, and that's the world we live in. Now, and again, I think some of this represents new kinds of challenges. I don't think they're necessarily all that our challenges are all, you know, completely greater and different than the people who lived before us. But there's some nuances that are different, and this postmodern idea of no absolutes is making it hard. Wade?
We know God says that Christ will draw those unto himself. So do we lower our standards enough to get the hippers of the world? You know, I mean, we don't lower our standards at all. We keep it the same as what the Bible teaches, and we feel like that those that want to learn and want to go to heaven and have a desire for that kind of thing, the scriptures will lure them into coming.
Yeah. But the world is working hard against that outcome too, yeah. Anybody else thought? All right.
Gordon got something.
Well, I don't know if we have any people members advertising a Marlboro fan, rough.
I know. Not that I know of.
Billboards and everything about.
Oh, yeah.
He was actually a rancher, and he was a rancher, and
A manly man.
he advertised Marlboro fan, but he never got the first smoke off of the cigarette. He was always something in his hand, that
Didn't he die of lung cancer?
he never smoked.
I think that guy did die of lung cancer.
I don't know.
You think, am I right about that, Tim? Yeah. But again, all of it to fashion our thinking. And so we got to control our thinking, renew ourselves in the mind, be transformed by the renewing of our mind. Let's move on to the next verse brought to our attention, Proverbs 4. Proverbs 4, beginning verse 23. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Ponder the path of thy feet, and let all thy ways be established. Turn not to the right hand nor to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. So, we got to keep our heart. That goes to the point we were just making about our thinking process. You got to control what you're thinking about, because out of the heart, notice the wise man says exactly what we were saying earlier. Keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. We said thoughts precede actions. What you think about is what you become. All right. Now he offers several suggestions as to things that will help in that, guarding our hearts. Put away from thee a froward mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. I don't know if your newer translations for froward would be something like contrary. What's the newer version say there in verse 24? Evil. Deceitful, okay. But I would just generalize verse 24 to simply be careful what you say. Verse 25, let thy eyes look straight on, and let thy eyelids look straight before thee. Be careful so verse 24, be careful what you say. Verse 25, be careful what you look at. Verse 26, ponder the path of thy feet, and let thy ways be established. No, don't just be wandering around out there. Have a plan. Stay on course. Don't be. And then turn not to the right hand or to the left. Remove thy foot from evil. Don't be distracted. Don't get off course. So, be careful what you say. Be careful what you look at. First of all, be careful of your thoughts. and helps with that. Be careful what you say, be careful what you look at. Plan your course and stick to it. And don't be distracted. I think those are all necessary if we are going to keep our hearts the way they should be kept. Yeah.
Well, don't you think that's talking about character? I mean, character is habits of the heart, and those verses are talking about keeping your heart with all diligence. In Philippians 4 and verse 9, right after Paul talked about all the things that we should think on, in verse 9 in Philippians 4, he says, "Those things which you have both learned and received and heard and seen in me do, and the God of peace shall be with you." New versions say practice. The things that you've learned and heard and seen, practice those. And so our character is determined by the habits that we create in our heart. So, Paul was saying, practice, follow things that I'm doing, make decisions, set your heart up to do things that are right, and then your character will be a result of that. And I really think, I think we have such, in our culture, people aren't worried about character and I guess don't know how to achieve a good character, but the godly person's character is achieved by making good decisions with the heart. And so I really think that's what's being talked about in Proverbs 4.
Yeah, that verse 25, let thine eyes look right on, let thy eyelids look straight before thee. Again, and I'm going to keep saying this, I don't want to wear you out with it, but I'm thinking, don't imagine that these are the worst of all times. But while having said that, I do think we have to realize that there are some new challenges that we face in this current age that previous generations of God's people did not have to deal with, and that's visual things. There are all manner of ways that you can see all the evil you want. I mean, you can see unimaginable stuff if you want to, because it's just at the end of your fingertip as you cruise around through the internet, and that's ruining a lot of people. It has ruined a lot of people, and that is a particularly strong challenge. Keep your heart with all diligence, and you're going to be very careful about the things that our present culture is pushing at you to look at. All kinds of evil videos, all kinds of evil images. You got to really be careful, and that certainly goes to the worldly surroundings challenge that we're talking about tonight.
All right, let's move on to number 4. Let's go to Matthew 15. In Matthew chapter 15. I want to read, so the question is about Matthew 15:19. I want to read the verse before and after that. So let's read Matthew 15:18 to 20. Matthew 15, verse 18, Jesus said, "But those things which proceed out of the mouth come forth from the heart, and they defile the man. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies. These are the things which defile a man, but to eat with unwashen hands defileth not a man." So what was under consideration was eating, if you didn't, with unwashen hands. That's what Jesus was talking about. But in the middle of talking about that, he makes that statement, all the things that come out of the heart. The question says, from what does immoral conduct proceed, according to Matthew 15:19? Well, along with Proverbs 4, it's talking about the heart, or the mind. From out of the mind proceed all of these things. So I think people... evil thoughts make sense, but when people say a murder, where does a murder come from? So I go and kill somebody. Where did that come from? It came from my heart, because I had to think about it before I did it. I mean, I can't think of any examples of something that I do without thinking about it before I do it. But murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, blasphemies, all of those things come from the heart or your mind, and you're thinking about them. And so I think someone may say, well, there's a person who, scantily clad person, and so that caused me to lust, but that comes from the heart here. That comes from a mind, and I'm looking upon something and then lusting after it, and so all the issues proceed out of the heart.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. You think about those things that Jesus listed, and those things don't happen just by chance.
Right.
I just don't by chance murder somebody.
Right. Yeah.
I have to think
without
about
putting
that.
thought into it.
Huh?
Typically without putting thought
Yeah,
into
you
it.
would put thought into it, or any of the other things that he lists there. come from the heart. But if you think about that list, again, our world and the culture and society we live in, they're encouraging us to think along. Even murder. You know, you would like to think, well, they're not encouraging us to commit murder. But how many shows depict glorified violence? You know, I mean, they're all over the place, right? And well, maybe the good guy, he ends up killing a bad guy, but still you're seeing a murder. It's an interesting, how many of us would in a lifetime ever see a literal murder firsthand, eyewitness? None. We'll never see a murder. How many murders will you see by watching things on TV or movies? Hundreds, maybe thousands, right? I like to watch the old westerns, but there was a lot of killing on the old westerns, but it wasn't as bloody and gory as the ones are now. But I like to watch the old Gunsmoke episodes with Matt Dillon. Matt Dillon was killing people all the time. And I thought to look it up, wonder how many people Matt Dillon killed during the Gunsmoke series. And I think it was 139. So if you just watched Gunsmoke, you saw at least 139 people get killed. Yeah, but that was Matt Dillon. He was the good guy. He was killing the bad guys. Still, it conditions us. And that's what we're saying. The world conditions us to not be as put off by these kind of influences.
Yeah, I think there's a real pressure. Again, I mean, I don't think Matt Dillon's probably not influencing people today, but I mean, on social media and, you got these NFL players and these NBA players, and they post a video of themselves waving a gun around, and they think they look cool, and so some young child sees that, and it's a cool thing to do. And then so they grow up. I mean, there's a lot of issues there, but they grow up in this environment where that's cool. I mean, if somebody says something about you and you go kill them, now you're something really special. And so young kids see that, and it perpetuates this violent culture.
You see some of these videos. You see some of these videos where, and the guy, maybe the good guy, he's obviously a martial arts expert, and he's surrounded by 5 guys. He takes them all out in a matter of about 20 seconds, Yeah. But still, that violence, we're conditioned by that violence.
No, I agree with you.
Anybody have a thought or comment? All right. So our author asks us to make a list of the major influences in our society that corrupt the hearts of Christians. What would you list as the major things in our society that corrupt our hearts, or try to at least? Wade? Television for sure. And I would lump in there the movies, because the movies will ultimately be on television sooner or later. TV and the movies. And Josh already mentioned it is so disturbing. They almost feel like they have to include, there's just some gratuitous sex scene that doesn't have a thing to do with the plot of the story, but they have to throw that in there, and those are all kind of things that are meant to condition us, for sure. Anybody else? Got to include the internet for sure, right? And I think it's more pervasive than the others, because there's just zillions of hours of content out there on the internet, and you can go anywhere you want. It used to be if you wanted to see a dirty movie, you had to at least go to the X-rated XXX movie theater. If you wanted to look at pornography, you had to go to the bookstore and be seen buying a dirty magazine. You don't have to do that anymore. You can do that right in the privacy of your own home. And you imagine you could do it anonymously, but you probably absolutely can't. But still, I mean, it's out there. Suanne?
You don't have to watch the shows on TV, just watch the advertisements.
Exactly. That's true. Exactly right. Wade?
I think it's interesting, just to show you how influential the media is. Years ago, back when I was a kid, lots and lots of people smoked. Lots of people smoked. But you didn't hear a lot of people cuss, especially women. Now, because they have been pushing the smoking thing for years on the media.
Anti-smoking, yeah.
Anti-smoking. Smoking has significantly decreased. But guess what's increased? Cursing.
Oh, absolutely.
And everybody thinks...
And the worst words imaginable. Words that used to nobody would say in public are said all the time now.
And back when I was a kid, they had that cut off of TV. You didn't even hear that on TV. But now, you can just turn on a regular program.
Oh, yeah.
And it's there.
I think I've told this story before. I remember the first time my dad, I was just a little kid, my dad thought, he wasn't sure, but he thought he heard a cuss word on a TV show. He jumped up off his chair and went in and got on the phone and called the local TV station to register his complaint about this bad language on TV. I'll tell you, he wouldn't get anything else done now with all the bad language that's on TV now. It's just pervasive, absolutely. And then, of course, this is the thing that's troubling. When we're exposed to that all the time, it makes us more likely to talk that way under the same provocation. And so it's a very dangerous thing for sure. TV, movies, internet, peer pressure. We always mention peer pressure. Young people particularly susceptible to the influence of their peers who are also being influenced by all the worldly things. That's a tremendous pressure to conform, to be like, to dress like, to act like, to go to the same places and do the same things that others do. I don't want to be different. I don't want to be considered to be an oddball. I've thought, and I've illustrated it this way before. You want to see how powerful these kind of influences are. And this is really a dated expression now. I used to call it the Britney Spears effect. Of course, Britney Spears is long gone, so maybe now you call it a Taylor Swift influence or something like that. But you see girls, if you go to Walmart, you'll see girls dressed in clothes that make them look absolutely horrible. They would look way better if they covered up. They could actually be attractive if they covered up. But dressed the way they're dressed, it looks ridiculous. But that's just the power of the societal influences. You got to dress like that. That's what everybody's doing. That's what you got to do. And so that pressure is there.
Well, on this question, I started making a list, and so I listed some of the things: television, internet, radio. I put books, school curriculum, places of work, and then I just finally wrote in my notes, literally every angle. I mean, from every angle of life, we're influenced. You go to work, and there's people in the break room talking about things that will influence you for bad. I mean, it's literally everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think Satan is really. I mean, I think he's really got his arms around this thing for influencing the world.
Well, he's got a lot of tools in his
Yeah.
toolbox now and some that he didn't have before.
Right.
That he's using real effectively, for sure. John? Yeah, that's right. We're his main target, right? He doesn't have to worry about the people of the world. They are already doing what he wants. Exactly right. Wade?
If you can ever get Christians or people that call themselves Christians to make things look like it's normal, then everybody else wants to do it. I mean, look at alcohol. I mean, you watch Hallmark Channel, and that's supposed to be a
Wholesome.
channel. But all these people that call themselves Christian, they're out drinking alcohol all the time. And so, I mean, and that just makes people go, well, maybe alcohol's okay. You know, maybe it's okay to drink alcohol.
Yeah, I think you're right. Anybody else? Go ahead, Josh.
All right, number 6. Number 6 says, how can we avoid being corrupted by the filth that surrounds us? That's an open-ended question. Anybody got any thoughts about that before I give you my thoughts? So we've talked about all of this mess. We talked about it being everywhere, coming at us from all these different angles. So how do we avoid that? How do we avoid being corrupted by it? Tom?
When they cast out demons, if you didn't fill it with something else, there'd be more demons coming into the world. So, if you overcome the things, then you've got to put wholesome things in place to crowd out the evil that's always trying to get you something.
Yeah, it's true. I think that's true. Anybody else got any thoughts? I'll tell you what I thought about. I went to Psalm 39, and if you want to look there, I'll read a couple verses in Psalm 39. So David, this is a Psalm of David, and he talked about some of his struggles. In Psalm 39 in verse 1, it says, I said, I will take heed to my ways, that I sin not with my tongue. I will keep my mouth with a bridle while the wicked is before me. I was dumb with silence. I held my peace even from good, and my sorrow was stirred. My heart was hot within me while I was musing. The fire burned. Then spake I with my tongue. He said in verse 4, Lord, make me to know mine end and the measure of my days, what it is, that I may know how frail I am. Behold, thou hast made my days as an handbreadth, and mine age as is nothing before thee. Verily, every man at his best state is altogether vanity. In verse 6, he said, surely every man walketh in a vain show. Surely they are disquieted in vain. He heapeth up riches, and knoweth not who shall gather them. David, in verses 1 and 2, my goal is to not sin with my tongue. And so he decided, I'm going to keep my mouth with a bridle while the wicked is before me. But then he actually went too far, sort of, in verse 2, because then he just didn't say anything, even things that were good. That's kind of the struggle we deal with. I don't want to sin, so let me try to figure this thing out. But he went too far, caused him not to say anything good. Verse 4, I think what really helped him was he realized how short life was. He said, make me to know mine end, the measure of my days. In verse 5, he said, thou hast made my days as a handbreadth. I mean, it's just short. Life is short. And so I think one thing to help us avoid being corrupted by filth is just knowing that we're only here for a short period of time. And our lives compared to eternity is just nothing. And so knowing that, if we keep a spiritual mindset, we already talked about renewing our mind, having our heart guarded. If we know those things, then it helped me. Yeah, it's going to be tough still, but it'll help me not get caught up in all these things. Because
we just have to set our own limits.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know, if I can't control myself on the internet, I need to get rid of the internet. Yeah. If I can't control myself what I watch on TV, I need to get rid of my TV. Yeah. You know, Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17, wherefore come out from among them and be ye separate, saith the Lord. Touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. We've got to have that determination. And so if we have if I have a weakness at looking at pornography, and I've talked to people before about this, if I've got a weakness about pornography, I need to not have an internet connection. I need to get rid of my smartphone because I can see it all on my smartphone. I just need to do away with it. But you know, every time I've talked to somebody about that, they're not willing to do that. They're just not willing to make that break.
Yeah, or if your issue is drinking alcohol, and so on the way home, I can go this one route where I know some of the people from work are going to go to the bar. Maybe I take the long way home. Maybe I spend more money in gas to get home, but it's worth it, right? If I can't go that way and without getting myself into trouble, then take the long way home. There's a lot of examples like that.
Exactly. Okay, the next question asked was, list some Bible characters who had to overcome corrupt surroundings in order to serve God. You know, my first answer to that was all of them. Every faithful person who served God through the ages has had to overcome corrupt surroundings. So every faithful child of God, Old Testament and New, has had to overcome corrupt surroundings. I did put at the top of my list, though, Noah. I mentioned him earlier. You know, we feel like we're in a very bad spot. We feel like we're in such a distinct minority as we try to live right in this present world. And it's true. That's not an inaccurate estimation. But the fact of the matter is we're in a way better situation than Noah was. And so Noah maybe is the classic example. Anybody else that you think of? John? Lot. Lot got in a bad shape. He made some bad choices, but then when he got in, the New Testament says all the evil around him plagued him continuously. Right, Lot? Anybody else? James?
Abraham, his own family was idol worshippers, and he had to leave them. God called him out of that. And then he went to a land and still to idol worshippers, strangers, complete idol worshippers around him. He had to deal with it on all sides in the family.
Okay, I think you're right. Abraham. Really, you could just talk about almost every great Bible hero. They all were facing that. Let me take you to one New Testament text. 1 Corinthians 6. 1 Corinthians 6, beginning at verse 9. Know ye not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of God? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves of mankind, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of God. And such were some of you. But ye are washed, ye are sanctified, ye are justified in the name of the Lord Jesus and by the Spirit of our God. We've talked a lot of times about what a corrupt place the city of Corinth was. But the people who became Christians were stepping out of that. They had to overcome that evil culture that they lived in Corinth, and some did, and were serving God faithfully. And so, again, it's just the story. It's the story of all time. Righteous people have to fight corrupt influences of the world. Josh?
All right, number 8 wants us to go to Colossians 3. So if you look at Colossians 3, we'll read verses 1 through 3. All right, Colossians 3, beginning at verse 1, it says, If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. And so the question is, upon what is a Christian's mind or affections to be set according to these verses? Well, verse 2 says, set your affection on things above, not on things on the earth. So our affection, our mindset, our focus is supposed to be set on things above, and that sounds good, but that takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy put toward what our focus is going to be. How we think is going to be critical in order to determine how we live, and so we got to be determined. Okay, so my life is hid in Christ with God, so I'm sort of set apart for the purpose of serving God, and that's where my affection's got to be. And so these things that we see and do around here that worldly people do, that things that are sinful, man, they look from time to time like they're appealing. This person looks like their life is great. If I did the things that they did, wouldn't life be great? But if our mindset gets off of where it should be, we'll find out, maybe here, but we'll find out for sure in the long run that it's not great to live a sinful life. So our affection, our desires have to be looking toward the eternal.
Anybody? Any thoughts? So, next question. Does one have to, we've been talking about a lot of immoral things. Does one have to be immoral in order to be worldly? I think that's an interesting distinction. Would you say that you would have to engage in these immoral kind of things that we've been describing in order to be categorized as a worldly individual? What do you think? Roger? Yeah. So some people not even motivated to please God can avoid some of the kind of things we've been describing. I think that's right. I think the answer to that question is no, you don't have to be engaged in horrible, immoral, wicked deeds in order to be a worldly influenced person. In that same text that Josh was just reading in in Colossians 3, just reading the first verses there, but read down another couple verses. Look at verse 5. Mortify or put to death, therefore, your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, which is idolatry, for which things the wrath of God cometh upon the children of disobedience. I would focus in on covetousness there. So materialism, covetousness, seeking this world's money and the things that money will buy, making that your motivating influence in your life. And of course, the world is pushing us in that direction, right? The world wants us to crave material things. And there's a strong push for that. And that's a form of worldliness that clearly, as Paul says here, the wrath of God cometh on the children of disobedience, those who engage in such things. You don't have to engage in horrible acts of immorality and wickedness. There are other things, just anything that keeps you from having God in the first place in your heart is a form of worldliness that's going to cost you your soul. And again, talk about the dangers we face. We are right in the middle of that, right? We live in this great time of material prosperity, and those influences are powerful, really strong. We got to be on our guard against those things. We talk about it a lot, but it's certainly a necessary warning for us. Anything else anybody could think of? Josh, take us to the last one. We're just out of time.
All right, number 10, it says, is there some interest, some affection in my life that is drawing me away from my love for God and for things that are spiritual and eternal? So this is a So Bill Hall titled this Soul Searcher, and so this is for you to do for yourself. This is for me to do for myself. Do you have some interest, some affection in your life? Do I have some in mine that is drawing me away from my love for God and for things that are spiritual and eternal?
Hey, I like to go fishing. Fishing's a good, wholesome activity, right?
Yeah.
I mean, surely you're not telling me that fishing could be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, your point's valid. Even
Yeah.
if something good. You know,
Yeah.
you can be too busy doing even something that's good. And
I'm going to talk to Wade about that later.
Wade and fishing. Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it could be.
Wade
it could be
keeps spending money on his boat because he's really into that fishing thing.
Yeah, I think when we read that, though, we typically think about evil things, something that's wrong and bad, and we kind of convince ourselves, well, I'm not really doing anything evil or bad. I'm a pretty good guy, so there's nothing drawing me away. But if I got all of my focus on whatever it is, then yeah, I mean, it could be taking my affection and putting it in the wrong place. I think that's a valid question. But
So
each of us got to answer it.
And I really do think we got to understand that those are worldly influences. So we live in this time of prosperity. We have a lot of resources in regards to time and money to engage in completely wholesome activities in and of themselves. There's nothing wrong with hunting. There's nothing wrong with fishing. There's nothing wrong with golfing. Sports of every kind imaginable. And they're not bad in and of themselves, but if they become the distracting influence that keeps God out of first place in my heart, then that constitutes a worldly influence that has corrupted me. And we've got to be guarded against it. Anybody? Karen?
Sorry to go back to your previous question, but I thought about, for number 7, I thought about Nehemiah, who's rebuilding the wall, and he had people trying to stop him every step.
Every way they could. Yeah, Nehemiah would be a great one. And he's just like so many other heroes of faith that resisted the influences of the world to be faithful to God. That's what we got to do. Exactly right. Anybody else? Any other thoughts? All right. What we talked about tonight is not really new. We've talked about those kind of things a lot, but all reminders and warnings along those lines are appropriate. We certainly, as I said before, this is not the worst that the world's ever been. The world's pretty bad, but it's been worse in times past. Talk to Noah. But the fact of the matter is, I do think there are some unique new challenges that we face that generations of Christians did not directly face to the same degree that we do anyway, by modern technology and so forth. And we just got to be on our guard.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Next week, unfaithfulness. So a distraction or a test of our faith could be that someone that we have influenced for good in the past becomes unfaithful, and we might get discouraged by that. Someone in our sphere that has become unfaithful to God.